I'm so glad you wanted to join me tonight. I've done this all summer, you know. My late night walks. Not every night, of course, but whenever I can't sleep. I find it very soothing. And now that you're visiting, I thought I'd ask you to tag along. We insomniacs must stick together, right? It is nice to have some company. What do you think about my neighborhood? I love it here. Especially this forested park. Where I'm living now, it's like the perfect location. There are some newer apartment buildings like mine, but most of it is older, detached houses. It's nice and quiet for the most part, and just a short walk from the town center and my job. The area surrounding the apartment buildings is pretty boring and monotone. Lawns with nothing on them, a few playgrounds here and there. The rest of the neighborhood, though, every house is different. A different size, shape, color. And all of them has a small garden surrounding them. There are so many nooks and crannies everywhere. Fruit trees, hedges, flowers, garden sheds, little dead ends, or shortcuts from one street to another. Sometimes just a narrow, overgrown passage between the hedge of one garden and the fence of the next one. Just one street down from my apartment is the main road across the river. And if I cross one of the bridges, I'm instantly in the forested park. And I can look down on the river and the trees on the other side from my kitchen window. Sometimes I imagine that that's all there is, that I live alone in a vast forest. When I'm going to work, I can walk through the forested park, which is faster. It takes me 17 minutes to walk, or I can go around, which is a bit further. But it takes me through the town center, with every store I need. And if I take that route, I can get my grocery shopping done on my way home, for example. Or buy lunch on my way to work. On the other side, the park borders the lake. I like to watch the waves there on windy days. I could sense you were a bit worried when I told you about my solitary walks late at night, and that's very sweet of you, but there's really no reason to worry. It's a small town, and it's Norway, so I always feel safe here. This late and in the rain, we should have the place to ourselves, except for maybe a solitary jogger or two. They can be pretty dedicated. Aren't you glad I made you wear rain clothes? Not just rain jackets, but rain pants and boots too. It isolates against the wind and cold as well, not just the rain. It can get pretty chilly at night, and it doesn't always rain straight down. It can rain sideways too. You can feel the fresh air and the rain on your face, and the rest of you is perfectly dry and warm. But when it's not windy, I also like to bring an umbrella just for the sound of the rain hitting it. And it feels so snug to walk underneath it. And all there is your footsteps, the rain, the feeling of slowly moving your body. There's nowhere you need to be, no reason to check the time. It's like a walking meditation of sorts, and all the while the dark envelops you like a cocoon. And when you finally get back home again, you are comfortably tired and relaxed. Are you starting to understand why I enjoy these late night walks? There's quite a lot of hedgehogs around here. They're red listed, which means they're endangered, but I do see them now and then on my way to or from a night shift usually. And not just in the park, in the town centre too. The worst natural enemy around here is the robotic lawnmower. You know, the outside Roombas. That's why you're not supposed to use them at night. I hope some of the gardens around here have hedgehog hotels, just like some have bee hotels. Just a pile of leaves and branches will do. They need places to hibernate. We really should have messier gardens and lawns. It provides homes for many species, and it makes for a cozier neighborhood too, in my opinion. I like overgrown places and hideaways, nooks and crannies. Just the other night, as I was about to get on my bicycle to go to a night shift, I saw one of them in the middle of the road. It was just sniffing around, and I stopped to look at it. It walked towards me with no fear at all, right in the middle of the road. It was quite late and quiet. No cars could be heard, and the hedgehog slowly walked right up to me. I was just in its way, I guess, and when it stopped in front of me, I said to it, "Hey, you're a wild animal. Shouldn't you be afraid of me?" But the little fellow just ignored me. I wasn't important enough to talk to, I guess. He had more pressing matters to attend to. So he strolled slowly to the side of the road and disappeared into the bushes. and as I got on my bicycle to go to work, I thought to myself that maybe their chances of survival would have been greater if they had been more timid. Maybe they trust their quills too much. We're not the only ones up this late, it seems. I've always liked crows and magpies. Many people don't like them. They think they're ugly birds that makes ugly sounds. I think they're fascinating, especially the magpies, and I love the contrast of black and white on them. They're quite smart, too. I've seen them pick food out of trash cans, while their half-grown kids are somewhere close, watching and learning. If I stop and look up at them in their trees, watching them for a little bit, they become uncomfortable and fly away. Did you know that? Try it sometime if you don't believe me. Stop and look at magpies and crows. See if they fly away. They like to be the observer, I think, not the observed. Once, when I was on my way to the grocery store, and I was walking through my cozy neighborhood with all the different houses, I saw a cat in an apple tree. A grey and white cat, just barely visible between the leaves, and it was surrounded by so many magpies. They were sitting on the roof of the little house, on the fence surrounding it, in neighboring trees. There must have been at least 20 of them, ganging up on that poor cat, just guarding it. I asked the cat if it was in trouble, but it just looked at me like that was a really stupid question, which I guess it was in all fairness. When I came back from the store, the cat and the magpies were long gone. I have seen birds like that tease cats before, and staying just out of their reach. I always sympathize with the poor cats, but at the same time, the birds impress me too. Sometimes I like to go to the grocery store late at night. I mean, not very late, but like 8 or 9 p.m. There's one quite close to my apartment that's open until 11 at night. That's quite late for Norway, but it is more common than it used to be. Anyway, 8 p.m. is well after the afternoon rush, when everyone comes home from work. The staff only have a few more hours left to work before they can go home. Most of the day's duties are done. The streets are pretty quiet, and so is the store. It's peaceful. There's the hum of the coolers and freezers, the sound of my footsteps, faint traffic perhaps, and the darkness outside the windows. It feels like the evening will stretch out forever. I can shop whatever I want in perfect peace and calm. Walk home slowly, looking forward to whatever little treats or luxuries I have bought. In the summer, I try to imagine that I live in a forest. Well, I kind of do, I guess. But, we tend to think that the wilderness is outside of town, not in it. But when everything is lush and green in the middle of summer, it's easy to imagine that my neighborhood is not in fact part of a small town, but rather one house here and one house there in a vast and old forest, with a few small roads here and there. This imagined forest is always peaceful, not really impacted by anything happening outside of it. And when I go to the grocery store at night, I just cross the river and follow the trail along the other side of it, just inside the park. It's like a tunnel of leaves all around me, and at the end of it, I just pop out of the woods for a little bit, buy what I want, and pop back in again. Or so I imagine. The park really isn't that big, but it has so many crisscrossing little paths that you can walk around in it for quite a while without too much repetition. I like to see how it changes throughout the seasons. It's a rhythm that I have become a part of since I moved here. Parts of the park floods in autumn when it rains a lot, or in late spring because of the snowmelt from the mountains. I love what it looks like on snowy days. Everything is white and blue, or just white because of mist or clouds. And the new soft snow crunches under my boots, and the trees are enveloped in it. There is nothing quite as beautiful as a tree covered in snow. Snow also insulates, both sound and heat. Every sound is lower, more mellow or muffled on such days. And a snowfall in late spring makes everything green that much faster afterwards. It is the after winter, as I call it, I like the least. The last part of winter or very early spring, February, March, April. The trees don't sprout new leaves until May, so that's quite a few months where the landscape is mostly grey and brown. I still use this place though, because walking amongst trees is the most soothing and therapeutic thing I know. But to me, early spring is the time when dog poop and garbage from all winter resurface from beneath the snow, and the whole world is just brown and grey, without much colour. And then, in the weeks before the 17th of May, our national day, School kids clean up the garbage along the roads in their local community, which is always nice. Although I remember that it always felt unfair when I had to do it. And when spring is finally in full bloom, I always start listening out for an old friend of mine, the woodpecker. It's probably not the same one each year, but I never see more than one of them, so I imagine it is. I listen for it when I walk here on summer days, and if I do hear it, I can usually also find it. I follow the sound and look up, and there it is, black and white, and with a red hood on its head. When I was in kindergarten, each of us had a specific place in the entry hallway where we hung up our jackets and little backpacks and put our shoes. A sort of locker room, I suppose, but without lockers. It was just a shelf and a few pegs for each of us. Our spot had our name on it, but since we were mostly too young to read, each spot also had a picture of an animal. So we had to remember which animal was ours, and that's how we found our spot and our things in that room. Above my spot was the picture of a woodpecker, and I'm sure it was completely random, but it does still feel like there's a connection. I still think of it as my bird. So whenever I hear a woodpecker, I try to spot it. And when I find it, it doesn't fly away like the crows and magpies. When it realizes it's being observed, it stops pecking the tree and just jumps around the trunk looking at me. So we look at each other for a little while before I move on. There are plenty of wild raspberries around here. In fall, there will be rosehip berries, wilder and smaller than the garden variety, and rowan berries as well. The little white star-shaped flowers that pop up in spring are edible and just a bit tart. There are plenty of ducks on the river and by the lake, and sometimes in summer you can see people in kayaks or even just big floating devices drifting down the river, sometimes with a drink in their hand. It's hard to imagine right now. On Midsummer Eve, there was a big bonfire on the beach by the lake. There were smaller fires as well, people barbecuing everywhere, and someone played a guitar. Late in the evening, when the sun is low, the light becomes golden, and it falls through the leaves and branches so that there's a pattern of light and shadow on the ground, moving with the breeze, back and forth, like waves. It's so different from the harsh, flat light of midday. And at dusk in winter, that's the blue hour. The light is just amazing then, but very different from summer. But for the time being, Rainy nights like this one is my favorite, because the place is deserted then, and because the rain is like a curtain shielding us from the rest of the world. On nights like this place belongs to me alone, or so I imagine. Let's walk just a little bit further before we turn back.